Hey guys, thanks for joining us here at Salty Ginger Talk. One of the things we do on the podcast is we go out and find awesome people to share their wisdom and insights and life lessons with our audience. And we keep setting the bar high, and somehow we keep hitting it. Today's guest is no exception. Dennis Dowdell has a 40 plus year career, traveled all over the world, built huge businesses, helped thousands of people. He's a speaker. He does coaching for people who want to improve their lives. He's just an all around great guy. His message is so great and he speaks about it so eloquently. We had a conversation with him a couple weeks ago before we brought him on the show, and we've been really excited about this episode. So, without further ado, let's just bring Dennis on right now. All right. So, Dennis, welcome to Salty Ginger Talk. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Man, what an honor and a privilege, and look forward to our time together here, buddy.
All right, so you've got big shoes to fill because I really accurately, by the way, pumped you up in the promo for for the episode. Dennis and I had just a great conversation a couple of weeks ago. Kind of hit it off instantly, and I think you're going to love his energy. I think you're going to love his message. He's actually not. I say energy. He's not a rah rah guy. It's very real world. It's very practical, but it's also 70 plus years of experience that he brings to the table that he's willing to share with you while you're trying to help build a better life. And not for nothing, but Dennis isn't cheap to hang around. He does coaching, he does speaking, and he commands a pretty decent dollar to do those things. And he's here talking to us free. So like this is a pretty big deal that you're getting here. So really appreciate you joining us, Dennis. With that said, would you mind kind of giving the listeners just kind of a little background on how you got started in the world and how you worked your way into kind of the self-help slash coaching slash speaking? You can do high level. We can dig into the details after you give kind of an overview.
Sure. I mean, it was interesting. When I graduated from college, and I was kind of passed on probation getting out of college, not just going into college, but coming out as well. I didn't do well as far as classes go, but what I did do well at was people skills. I learned probably more about people skills through college than I did anything, and that's been the greatest asset that I've taken from that. And so that was great. But when I got out, I thought, I don't want to just go get a job and and just get up, go to work, go home, go to bed type thing every day. I want to find something that I can be passionate about, that I can believe in, and something that would allow me to make a difference for people. But there's one other thing that I wanted to have, and I wanted to be able to travel. So I figured I got to find something that I can do where I can travel. And so I ended up getting a job driving a school bus. And it turned out, well, this is because my buddy, had drove a bus, and it worked out real well because he could, get up early in the morning, take the kids to school, and then he had off in the middle of the day. And then he'd go back, take them home. And so there was some, flexibility there, and you had in the middle of the day to do other things. And so I thought, well, that could work really well because that way I could go to job interviews during the day and I could be more particular. As long as I didn't have to have a job because I was driving the bus, I'd pay the bills, I could do that. And I was coming up on my 30th birthday, and I thought, I better get on with this thing. I mean, I better find, holy mackerel, I mean, so, time started flying by fast. And so, I really became committed and really drove into it. Spent 7 months diligently looking for work. And just to kind of set the background for my motivation in one sense is the fact that I actually found two jobs that would have paid me more than I was looking for, and about 30% more than I was looking for. But the money was tempting, but I thought, no, that's going to be a job. I,
Mm.
I don't want to just, go to some place to get the money to pay the bills. And fortunately for me, I held off because then I ran into a startup company. It was about an hour and 15 minutes from my home. Drove out there for what I thought was a one-on-one interview. And when I get up there, this guy says, listen, glad you could be here. Want to tell you about the company, the products, the opportunity that's available. Sit in on this little presentation over here. And I thought, oh no, what am I doing here? And they went in, they started talking about these products, and the product made sense. It was in the nutrition industry. So, gives people energy, help people lose weight, help people feel. And I said, okay, that's cool. I mean, everybody needs energy. And look at, I mean, more and more people need to lose weight all the time. So that made sense to me. But then they started drawing squares and circles on the board. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is some kind of sales. And I'm thinking, I hate sales.
Mm.
I don't like sales. I don't want sales. I'm not doing sales. I'm out of this place. But it was so crowded in this room, I couldn't get out without being rude. And I said, when this is over, I'm gone. But then the last 5 minutes, the founder of the company, the guy I had the appointment with, gets up to close this presentation. And he gets up there and he says, gang, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go out, and he says, make a difference for customers, for people, customer by customer, city by city, state by state, and we're going around the world. And I thought, whoa, 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 wait a minute, make a difference around the world. And so my ears opened back up again. I said, how does this work? Right. And it was phenomenal. So afterwards, I'm telling him my dilemma here. And I said, listen, I love the idea of the product, the cause, what you're doing is great. And this guy was unbelievable. He was a 24-year-old ninth grade dropout, right? But he had so much passion, so much conviction and direction. And I'm thinking, man, this guy knows exactly what he wants, exactly where he's going. And from what I could tell, he knew exactly how he was going to get there. And I think, I don't know about the product or the company, but it would be worth it just to work with that guy. That guy would take me under his wing and show me how to develop that and to be able to have that. I mean, that's what I want to be able to do every day when I go to work. I want to go to work with passion and conviction and direction. And little did I know, he was talking about going around the world. Joe, we hadn't left Los Angeles yet. And he's already talking about going around the world. And I'm thinking, who is this kid? And so I give him my dilemma. I don't like sales. And he says, but Denny, because he saw my little resume. He says, you're working with college kids, right? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, what do you do with these kids? And I said, well, I just kind of like a coach, a little guide, a little, I just disciple them a little bit. And, we just what's that mean? He said, well, just kind of help them solve problems, learn how to live life. And he said, well, do any of them have weight problems? And I said, Mark, they're in college. I said, you never heard of the freshman 15, the freshman 30? And and he said, I said, of course they got weight problems. And he said, well, what about financial problems? He says, do they have financial problems? I said, Mark, they're in college. I said, what are you talking about? I said, there's not too many trust fund kids going through college. I'm thinking, what are you going to? And he said, well, Denny, he says, now you have two more problems to solve. Now, Joe, I had heard the concept before, but at that moment, the penny dropped. And I thought, holy mackerel, I, I don't have to sell anything to anybody. All I've got to do is help them solve a problem they have up to that point in time not been able to solve. And if I can do that, they win and I win. And so that set that foundation. That was the first concept that as a mentor, this guy, embedded into my thinking. And I'm telling you, it was just amazing. And I was honestly that way. I was the most low key, non-pressured, guy to help people to understand what was going on because my thinking was, listen, you got a problem, I got a solution. If you don't like my solution, you keep your problem, I keep my product, we're both happy.
Yep.
know, and so what it did, it took all the pressure off and allowed all the fun to come in. And so that's what it was. And I just started, day at a time. And it was exactly like what he said. We literally went from city to city. Then we started going from state to state. And then we opened in Canada and then Australia and then England. And by the time England opened up, I had grown and developed enough. I said, that's it. I said, here's my chance. Travel the world. I'm going. And I packed my bags and I went to England. And I spent, a couple months to 62 days there, working and developing some team leaders over there. And then I came back and Mexico opened. And I thought, wow, Mexico, and I thought these guys are hard workers. And I think there's a lot of overweight people in Mexico. So this could work really good. I said, but I only had one problem. I didn't speak Spanish. So I bought a dictionary, memorized some words, packed my bags, and went to Mexico. And but you just you figure it out, you make it happen, you work it out, And I did, and right now Mexico is a major part of my business. And so I just did this, and I literally went from country to country, and since we got started, I mean now I've been to 52 countries, 5 different continents, and developed an enormous team. And just because of this the ability and the freedom I have, and then the mentors, because Mark, the founder of this company, introduced me to several other people. In fact, he was the one who introduced me to Jim Rohn. Most people know this guy. He's kind of like the guru of gurus. Well, I mean, I had the privilege of working with this guy and having this guy become a mentor to me. I mean, we traveled the world. We were on the stage together. I mean, it was just phenomenal. And so to spend time with people like that, I ended up getting involved in a church in Southern California. It was a smaller church in the beginning for California. There was only about 400 people there. But this guy was amazing. I mean, he had an ability to integrate spiritual things into everyday life and business so that it made sense. And as it turns out, this church just grows. When I left California a few years ago, there was over 74,000 people. So we went from 400 to 74,000. Most people know the pastor is a guy named Rick Warren, author of the best-selling book, The Purpose-Driven Life. And so I spent 33 years working with this guy, listening to him, being involved in some of the campaigns and stuff. So I had the privilege of being around some amazing, amazing men. In 1989, I ran into a guy named Bob Beal, probably the wisest human being I've ever met in my life. I mean, just his whole, and talk about introverted and quiet. I mean, this guy, I mean, he talked with a tone that went like this. Nothing,
Mm.
that's just, I mean, but I tell you, what came out of this guy's mouth was brilliant. And he's an executive mentor. He's been on several boards of major corporations and so forth. But his perspective, we were talking about that before we got started here, this perspective is something that he has an ability to see things that people just don't see from a different perspective. So being around those kind of people, was some of the greatest, had the greatest impact on my life, learning to absorb and assimilate. And they're all different. Their all approach and what they did, their areas of expertise was different. So I had an expertise in vision and promotion. I had a mentor who was brilliant at training, one of the best trainers, a guy named Larry Thompson, unbelievable. He wrote a book called The Millionaire Training. He's created, I don't know how many millionaires, around the world. And so I had the chance to be with him, and of course Jim Rohn and Rick Warren and Bob Beal. And so with these kind of people, and they're each area of a specialty. That's really what allowed me as a school bus driver, to come out of that and assimilate and then to begin to apply, and there was a commonality between all of them. And I couldn't become who they were, but I could follow the principles that they followed. And that's what I grasped. I learned to grasp a hold of principles, success principles, life principles that made life and business work. And the best part about the principles, see, we were talking, I'm not that smart. I graduated with a 1.98 average. So I'm
Mm.
not that smart, like in the classes stuff, right? But the thing about these principles is they work whether you're smart or whether you're dumb, whether you're educated or uneducated, whether you're rich or whether you're poor. It doesn't make any difference. Principles work for everybody who applies them. And so I learned if I just apply them, the results will take care of themselves. And so that's what I did. And I took notes. I mean, I spent time. You go to seminars and you get around people and, they'll take notes and stuff like that. They go home and put them on the shelf. I don't, I actually go home and read my notes. I've got journals, a stack of journals
Hmm.
filled with notes. And, and it's great just going back to review. And, I've read their books and that kind of thing. And so that's really what kind of, launched and developed this amazing business. And now what I'm doing is I'm realizing, I've developed the business within this company, but now it's time for me to expand my territory and to be able to reach out to people outside of this company. I mean, my organization, just my personal organization, is over 250,000 people. You know, I put over 300 people in the top 1% income bracket. So the principles worked, you know. So I'm looking at it, I said, gosh, there's a hunger out there for this. People are trying to make sense out of life. People are trying to, take what they have and create what they don't have. And so now I'm committed to be able to get out there and do that. You know, I put together some online training programs, 1-day seminars, and which I discovered recently. I'm going to have to probably make that a 2-day seminar in order to make it work right. But anyway, so it's just been phenomenal to watch what's happened. And they say that you want to find something you love to do, and if you love what you do, you never have to work another day. Joe, I haven't worked in 45 years.
Mm.
I mean, they pay me to do this. That's what the deal is. I mean, it really is amazing. I get paid for this, and I continue to get paid for it, and that's the beauty of it. So anyway, I've had the most unbelievable ideal life, and that doesn't mean there weren't problems. I mean, listen, I ran into lots of problems, but that was a part of that process. That's a part of that growth. But I've had this amazing, wonderful, incredible life. And, and in fact, one of my mentors, Bob Beal, fascinating, like I say, fascinating guy. And he's this guy taught me how to ask questions and collect questions. And I learned a long time ago, the guy never asks questions or says something to me or suggests something to me without a specific reason behind it, right? So he asked me this one day. He said, Danny, he says, you've developed this huge organization around the globe. He said, tell me, he said, how did you do that? I mean, what are the principles that you utilized to create such a massive team that stuck around and that did well? And I said, well, there's a lot of them. He said, make me a list. All right. So I just sat down and I wrote out a list. I mean, I had 50 some odd things. I reduced it down to 45. And, and he told me, he said, send it to me. So I sent it to him. And I sent him this list and we're on the phone talking. He said, well, Denny, he says, I said, I think you've got a book there. And I said, what? He said, yeah. I said, I think you've got a book there. Listen, I had a book on my bucket list, but that was 20 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I flunked English twice, so I'm thinking, who am I to write a book, right? But he said, Denny, he says, you've got it right there. He says, take each principle, write a chapter on each principle and your experience of how you utilize that in developing this monstrous organization and wealthy people. And I said, okay, I can do that. And so there it was, and listen, he had that in mind before he ever asked me the question.
Sure, yeah.
you know so anyway, so that's kind of what it is, and that's kind of brought me up to where I am today. And so I mean, life is great. It's still great. Every day I get to get up and do something I love to do, and I'm just grateful that I have an opportunity to share with your audience and be on your show. This is just another one of those things that is fun for me.
I love it. One of the things we do, or that I do, when we have guests on, is I recap themes that we hear over and over and over again from our guests. And what our guests have in common generally is they've overcome challenges, obstacles, fears, concerns in their life and built a really good life for themselves. And that comes in a wide variety of things. We had a guy on, Levi, who's up in the Pacific Northwest. He was a musician and he now does, through his music, he does concerts for kids that are quarantined or too sick to be out in public. And they'll have a rock star during the middle of a concert, point at the camera and go, hey, Teddy, we're all thinking of you. We love you. We know it's been hard, but hang in there. We're fighting with you. And he stumbled into that. But the reason he did is because he kept taking action. And everything you just talked about, one of the common themes you mentioned was keep taking action. So you get out of college, you didn't just stagnate and wait. You didn't know what you wanted to do, but you got a job and kept looking for something that made sense to you, but you were taking action the entire time. And then through that network of where you wound up, you meet some really great mentors. And what were you doing when you met those mentors? You were taking action. You put yourself in positions where I always say luck is where preparation meets opportunity. And so
Absolutely.
maybe there's luck, but that luck is a lot of times created by the person who experiences it. So I try to call those things out for listeners to make sure that they don't miss some of the really important points.
Well,
Um,
that's true. They say the harder you work, the luckier you get.
for sure. And it's just like over and over and over again, you can see that evidenced in the real world. That's just how it goes.
Yeah. And by the way, and you hit a very important point there. Take action doing something. It may not be the end result. I was just reading this story about Gene Hackman, how he had this overnight success in this one first movie that he made. And he said, but the overnight success took him 15 years to
Yep.
get, to create through the little bit parts here and a little bit part there and in washing dishes or whatever it was that he did. Um, and so the idea of just taking action, and I didn't wait to try to make a difference for people. I wasn't waiting to find the job to make the difference. I wanted to make a difference every day. I made a difference, with the kids on my bus. I mean, I wanted them to feel great. I did things to try to uplift them and to give them little insights. In fact, I used to take and write a little proverb of the day.
Mm.
And I would just a one-liner, right? One-line proverb, right? And I would tape it on the dash of my bus. So as they're walking down the aisle and they come down the steps, there's this little proverb right there on the front that they can read, right? And so you think, okay, some read it, maybe they don't, I don't know. But one day I forgot it. And three people said, hey, here's the saying. And I go, yes, yes, it's so cool, right? So, I mean, you wanted anything you can do to make a difference. This one day, this gal, and she was one of these hard-nosed kids, troublesome kids, kind of thing
Mm.
and everybody gets off the bus and, she's about 3 or 4 rows back and she comes walking up real slow, you know, and I don't know if she thought she was going to irritate me because I got to get to my next stop, right? But I just looked at her. I said, Amy, I said, man, I said, it looks like you've had a bad start to the day. Yeah. And I said, but Amy, I said, listen, I said, Amy, I said, do you know what your name means? Because I would study the meaning of names. And she said, huh? No, don't know what had woman. I said, oh yeah. I said, Amy, I said, your name is very special, very significant. I said, Amy, your name means God. And that means no matter what anybody says or anybody thinks, you are a beloved person. And you have the ability to make a difference for people that nobody else can be because you're a beloved person. So don't ever forget that. Oh, she popped off the bus. I never had another problem with that kid for the rest of the year. I mean, it's just like it just blew the head, her head right off the top, and I mean, it was just amazing. So, I mean, you never know, you never know. So just doing whatever you can to make a difference for somebody, and so I didn't wait till I found the job that allowed me to make a difference. I wanted to be able to make a difference immediately. I mean, while I was in the process. And so, you just do what you're the best at every day, and eventually you'll end up in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, I love that. There's a trend now, and I don't know. We talk about trends now versus trends 30 years ago. I don't know how true it is because I'm not sure how different human nature is
Right.
30 years ago versus now. I think people are still roughly the same. But I think because of social media and the like, you're down in Texas right now. I'm up in Ohio right now, and we're able to have this great conversation through technology, right? So
Right.
there's a lot of benefits to technology as well.
Yeah.
But this trend of it's what quiet quitting or just doing the minimum at
Mm,
your job, and I'm so against it.
mm,
I think it's a terrible approach. Like it's just a terrible approach to life. If you're
yeah.
gonna do something, you should do your absolute best or whatever that something is,
Yeah.
because you never know where it's going to lead. And, um, I always tell people, I tell them a couple things. One, I have failed my way to the top because I've made a lot of mistakes in my career, like a lot of
Uh,
mistakes, like
we
big mistakes too, not small ones, big ones.
we were on the same path.
And secondly, um, I wound up where I wound up because I've had this attitude and mentality when I was the lowest person on the totem pole. I
Mm,
didn't act like the lowest person on the totem pole. I happened to have the lowest job on the totem pole, but I never thought I was not worth it, or I never thought I didn't have more in me, or I never thought I wasn't capable of doing more. I didn't know what that was. I just knew that if you gave me a challenge, I would get after it and I would do everything I could to try to accomplish that challenge. And if I didn't accomplish it the first time, then I'd get back up and go after it again. And um, you know, that's something I encourage people to do a lot. And I think your
mm,
story has so much of that in it, and I know some of this from our conversation previously, but you just talked through some of it here
yeah.
with the listeners as well.
Well,
Like you talked about going to Mexico. I don't speak Spanish, but we need to open Mexico. Then I'm going to Mexico. I'm going to figure it out.
yeah. Well, and I love what you're saying there too, Joe, because, um, I, like I said, I'm not the raw type of guy and that kind of thing. And, every company, they always have different promotions and such, if you do this, you get that, if you get this volume, if you do this many sales, then you're going to get this little vacation, you're going to get this, and to be honest with you, that stuff never really motivated me. And I had this, senior executive in the company asked me one day about it, and I said, "Well," I said, "Listen," I said, "You don't want me to promote, this thing." And he says, "Why not?" And I said, "Because, my heart's not in it." I said, I mean, my thinking is this: listen, a promotion is going to give you a short-term gain, and I understand. Okay, listen, and I told him, I said, "Listen, I get it. I understand why you have it. I utilize your promotions because I know, the way it is that people are motivated by, the toys. If you do it, I give you a piece of candy. I said, but it doesn't last.
Yeah.
And I said, I mean, and my thinking is, listen, if you can do that good, why not just do it?" I mean, one of my trainer mentors, he said, if you're going to shoot a king, kill him, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
that's right.
so it's kind of like you said, if you're going to do it, do it. And so why not just do the best that you can? And if you do the best that you can, if you did the best you can this month, why not try to do just a little bit better next month? I mean, listen, obviously you reached this particular level. If you did it once, you can do it again. So why not just do the best you can every day, every month? And if you do that by the end of the year, amazing things happen. And so that was always my philosophy. I took advantage of the promotions that the company did because people like them. But my training said, listen, go for the promotion, but here's what I want you to do. I want you to do the best that you can possibly do today. Try to do a little bit better today than you did yesterday. And if you can just do a little bit better today, if you can get a little bit wiser today, if you can get a little bit smarter today, if you can refine the process just a little bit better today, every day it accumulates. And so that's what you want to do. And if you'll do that, you'll have a career that'll last you forever. And so I mean, so that's been my process. I just say, listen, I'm just going to do the best that I can. When you who was it? Rockefeller said, when you've done your best, the hell with the rest.
Yeah.
I've
So
only
what
got
you, yeah, what you just described, I call the compound interest of life, because people understand compound interest as it relates to money, but
mm,
it feels to me like they don't connect the dots to their daily habits have a direct correlation to their success in life. And it's very important when we talk about success. You get to define what success looks like. And yeah, like the paths you and I traveled are similar in some respects, but they're not. Because I know from our previous conversation, you were a bachelor for most of your life and you're married now, but you were doing this because you wanted to do it. You weren't doing it to support a family or to make a spouse happy. You were doing it because you really wanted to do it. Whereas I got married very young. I was 21 when I got married. And, I'm still married to an awesome lady. She stuck around for 30 plus years. And I love that. And I was just going to say, I'm certain you're happy for me and the choices I made and that they worked really well for me. And I'm certainly happy for you and the choices that you made and that they worked out really well for you. Because it's not my place to make decisions for you, but it is my place to make decisions for me. And I got to be comfortable with how I live my life and what I'm doing. And you've talked a lot about that. When you work with folks now, how do you coach them on understanding that? Because a lot of people struggle to understand, at least in my experience, a lot of people struggle to understand that they've got to just be who they are, and that's good enough. That's when they're really going to have a successful life, is when they stop trying to act the way they think other people want them to act and just act like themselves. How do you accomplish that with folks when you mentor them?
Well, and that's a process.
Mm,
It's something you've got to kind of build over time. One of the things I try to instill into people that success isn't what you may think it is. It's not the accumulation of possessions and position and power.
yep.
You know, I like to call success is basically learning to live life according to your values. See, if you live life according to your values, then it doesn't make any difference what you do, and it doesn't make any difference how much you do. If you can live life according to your values and develop that inner character, then that's the best thing that you can do. See, success isn't really what you do. Success is what others do as a result of what you do. So the goal is influence, impact. See, and this is where we see this distinction. See, for people, and I even tell them, I teach my team from the front. I said, listen, I said, if success is your goal, get a new goal. In other words, meaning, position, possessions, and power.
Yes.
If that's your idea of success, get a new goal. And here's why, okay? Because you can accumulate the position, the possessions, and the power, but it can be gone tomorrow.
Hmm.
I mean, literally, it can be gone tomorrow. But when you influence people, when you make an impact on people because of who you are, see, that lasts forever, and that's never gone. See, so that's where the real difference makes. See, at the end of your life, I mean, listen, at the end of your life, nobody on their deathbed asks to see their toys and trophies, right? I mean, no, what we want to be able to do is we want to accumulate the number of people that we've touched, not the number of accomplishments we've accumulated. And people try to go for the accomplishments. I say go for the people. Success is measured in people, not accomplishments. And if they can get that down, guess what? The accomplishments seem to just fall in line.
It's funny how that works, isn't it? I love that.
It really is.
Success is measured in people, not things. I love
Yeah,
that.
yeah, absolutely. And it's work. And you know something? You enjoy it more. The pressure's off, right? And then you've got more of a stability in your life because listen, you're going to have ups and downs as we go through life, and problems are part of the process. I always say, problems equal progress. Adversity is advancement. You know, and it's true. I mean, when's the last time anybody ever made any kind of progress without a problem?
Yeah. It doesn't. It reminds me, I'm sure you remember John Wooden, the basketball coach at
Oh,
UCLA, right?
love
He
this
was
guy.
legendary.
Yeah,
And he had so many good quotes, but one of them was, a doer makes mistakes. Show me someone making mistakes and I'll show you someone headed somewhere.
yeah,
And this guy is probably the most successful coach ever in college
yeah.
basketball.
Oh, yeah. I
He's
mean, unbelievable.
encouraging effort at the expense of perfection.
Yeah.
Exactly like you were just talking about. So it popped into my head. Sorry for interrupting you there, but
No, no. And in fact, I quote Wooden all the time. I mean, 88 consecutive games, seven national championships out of 10 years. I mean, nobody's even close to this guy.
yes. Yeah, and he was revered by his players. That was the part
Oh,
about it because You find me a guy that played for John Wooden that doesn't speak about him without reverence. You can't do it. You won't find him.
Doesn't exist.
Because he was such a spectacular human being. He happened to be a really good basketball coach as well, but he was a better person than he
Yeah.
was basketball coach. And he instilled that in his players. And that was part of the success at UCLA is they
Yeah.
played with those values and they were a team, you know?
Well, and you talk about those values. See, that was one of the things that, in fact, I remember the story about him and Bill Walton, number one draft pick, for college. And he
I
wrote,
love this story. I know the story. I love it. Please tell it.
he shows up and he's got his beard on. And Wooden says, okay, he says, we'll see you tomorrow. And he said, what do you mean? He says, you show up with a clean face or you don't play. And it's the number one draft pick. And Walden thinking, hey, I'm the guy, right? You know, Wooden says, no. He says, we play by values here. We play by principles here. And so, I mean, and oddly enough, he showed up the next day with, shaved face. So, I mean, see, but that's living by principles. And most people live by circumstances instead of principles.
Yep.
That's probably a good idea to design your life around principles. Not pleasure. We want to build our life on people and values. Not on accomplishments and that kind of thing. So I mean, that makes all the difference. So that's a process that you've got to gradually instill into your team, because they first hear it, okay, it sounds good, but to actually apply it, it takes time. And I think people need to understand how distinctly unique each individual is,
Mm,
you know, and when they understand their uniqueness, one of the biggest enemies that people have is the enemy of comparison. Or, we talked about it earlier. We compare ourselves to somebody else. I want to be like them. No,
mm,
you don't want to be like them. You want to follow the same principles that they have. You want to have, if you see characteristics in somebody that you like, you don't want to become that person, but you do want to follow their principles. You do want to develop the characteristics that you admire. See, and you take those characteristics and you apply it to your personality and who you are. And that's where the difference comes. Uh, we have four different ways of thinking about things, and this is what gets a lot of people in trouble. The least mature way of thinking is, we think everybody's just like me. And this causes so many problems with people, and they say, what's the matter with that person? Well, what are they doing that for? See, and we think that because because I wouldn't do that.
mm.
Because I wouldn't do that. Why would they do that? You see? And so we think because everybody's like me, so they should think like me and act like me and respond like me, and then they're confused as why, they have troubles with people. And after a while, as they grow and mature, they begin to realize, oh, well, okay, come to think of it, everybody isn't like me. Okay, so I'm good at here and they're good at that. And so they kind of grow and they say, okay, so I'm good at this and they're good at that. And gosh, maybe if we work together, we could do a little bit more. And so that's better. And then they finally get to this point where they say, come to think of it, nobody's like me. And when you get to that point, you realize nobody's like you. Now all of a sudden you realize that you have something to contribute, and so does everybody else.
Yeah.
Jim Rohn used to say, everybody needs, like, each of us need all of us, and all of us need each of us. You see? And I mean, think about it. I mean, nature is a great teacher, right? I mean, it teaches, and there's so much we can learn from nature. But I mean, look at, we each have fingerprints, right? Everybody
Yep.
knows about fingerprints. So this has been a big deal for a long time. 8 billion people now, 8 billion different fingerprints. Isn't that amazing? Nobody has the same fingerprints, 8 billion different fingerprints. And then of course we discovered DNA. Oh yeah, now DNA, and that really gets ridiculous, complicated. But DNA, distinct, 8 billion different DNA strands, right? Eye prints. You talk to iridologists, you can see a lot from the eyes, but we each have different eye prints 8 billion different eye prints.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely fascinating. And here's one I didn't know until just a few years back. But then we also have, while we have our voice prints, we've seen that with, CSI and all the, those
Yep.
kind of things, we can get the voice that, yeah, that's their voice kind of. So we have a voice print, but we also have a unique heartbeat. And it was a pediatrician that informed me on this one, right? We each have unique heartbeats. So what does that mean? Okay, it means that we feel things different, right? We see things different, right? We express things different.
Yep.
Our voices, right? We have different passions, right? So all of these things are distinctly unique to me. So I see things different, I hear things different, I express things different, I have different passions, and so different feelings. And so that's what allows me to make a contribution to any community that I'm involved in because nobody has seen the things I've seen, heard the things I've heard, read the things I've read, or experienced the things I've experienced with my cultural background, my financial background, my educational background. It's all distinctly unique for every human being on the planet.
You bet.
Allows us to understand there's value in every person, but I also have value. So I have something to contribute. And that's the ultimate. The ultimate is really what can I contribute to my family, my friends, my community, my country? What can I contribute? Because that's really what I'm here for, And
So yeah, that's so well said. And we do like we did, you and I do an intro call before we bring someone on the podcast. We just want to kind of have an idea of what good subjects are to talk about so we can kind of give the best experience to the viewers as possible. And
Mhm.
one of the things I say on there, just to kind of lay the groundwork, it's very funny to me personally that I'm doing a podcast like the one that I'm doing because I am not in any way, shape, or form a touchy feely guy. And James, our producer, has been in a couple of meetings where people have kind of pushed for different things, and I have kind of flatly refused those things. So he's seen it in action. So when I always say, when there's like an asshole contest, you do not want to be in an asshole contest with me because I'm probably going to win it. I've like it's one of the best tools in my toolkit. However, what I am not and never have been is judgmental. And I want to know what other people think. I want to know how other people approach things because they might have a really good thought process or a really good perspective or a really good approach that I have never heard of or never considered. And I can get better by learning that. But they're not going to share it with me if I'm going to judge them based on how they think or what they say. And so we on the podcast in particular, it's all bets are off. It's wide open. You get to talk about and say whatever you want to say. Now, we're very fortunate. We attract really high caliber people to come on to the podcast. And so that's helpful because we don't have people that are prejudiced or racist or misogynist or expressing ideas that are clearly out of bounds.
Mhm.
But we learn so much from that, and this is a very long-winded way of me getting to how much you've traveled. So you've been to so many different countries, so many different continents, experienced so many different people from so many different cultures. Can you talk a little bit about probably the biggest difference that you see, but more importantly, the the couple biggest similarities that you see in all the folks you've interacted with around the world?
Well, I tell you, that's a great question, Joe, because and it's one of the things I think that has helped me a lot is that I see everybody as the same. Everybody's equal. They have different backgrounds, experiences and understanding, knowledge, or education, that kind of stuff. But here's what I know: everybody's trying to maximize their life, and then as we go through life, everybody has problems, and everybody's trying to solve the problems, and they're trying to figure out what can I do and how can I do things so that I can overcome the problems that I'm faced with every day so that I can accomplish the things that I want to accomplish, so that I can be the kind of person that I want to be. And so, regardless of the country, regardless of the culture, regardless of the education, regardless of the background, it's simply zeroing in on the needs of other people. And so it really simplifies the process. See, all I got to do is find out what the need is and then figure out how to fill it. That's it. You know, and again, here's where nature is that great teacher once again, right? I mean, think about it. Rivers don't drink their own water. Trees don't produce fruit for themselves.
Mm.
The sun doesn't provide heat for itself. Flowers don't produce a fragrance for themselves. But they take all that they have, all that they are, all that the resources to create and develop something for others. And therein lies the secret to life.
Mhm.
That's it. That's the key. Think about this, Joe. Every other principle for success, okay, and maximizing your life lies in understanding that principle of life. It's not about you. That's the point. It's not about you. See, I know, listen, I understand that's very countercultural today. And, look out for number one, take care of me, all that kind of stuff. But seriously, see, our lives were designed, with all the talent, skills, gifts, and abilities that we have. See, we think they're all those talent, skills, gifts, and abilities that we develop. We think it's for us to make me look good, to make me stand out and to create my image. No, no, that's not it. All our talent, skills, gifts, and abilities, they're not for us. They're for somebody else. I tell people, I said, listen, never want to be proud of yourself. You can be proud of what you do, but but I mean the idea here is, listen, I have the talent, skills, gifts, and abilities. Those are gifts. That's what's been given me. That's some of those things are inherent, and I just need to develop those things that I have. But I mean, do you think Michael Jordan? Do you think that he gets excited? Do you think he's proud of himself when he hits a 3-pointer? I could do 3-pointers all day long, backwards, upside down, backwards in the air. No. Why? Because that's Michael Jordan, right? That's who he is, right? Now listen, if
Yep.
I did the 3-pointer, I'm going to be proud because that's not who I am, right? But see, so our talent, skills, gifts, and abilities, see, they're not for us. All of that is designed, they're like tools. It's a part of my tool belt for me to utilize to make a bigger difference and contribute to other people the things that they're missing. And then I can utilize their talent, skills, gifts, and abilities for the areas and things that I'm missing in my life. And together we can have a phenomenal community and we can all, rise up together. We can all grow together. And so that's where, our real purpose comes in when we realize that life is not about me, but it's about what I can contribute to others. That's why I say it's not about the accumulation of positions and possessions and power, but it's about influence. It's about impact. See, and so that's what I want to do. I just want to make sure that I take all that I have and use it in the service for others. Zig Ziglar says if you help enough people get what they want, you can get everything that you want. And it is true. I like the saying, he who serves the many earns the money and a reputation. You see? And so, and then you enjoy it, and then there's less effort to it. Then I don't have to be trying to be somebody else that I'm not because that's hard work.
Yes.
Easier just to be myself and do what I'm good at. That's why they talk about, build on your strengths. There's a reason for that.
Yes. Look, well, so well said. And we can validate that because, like I talked about earlier, when I pointed out that you were taking action, which led you down the path that you're on, but it was consistent action, which is one of the things we encourage our viewers to do. Just start and get going. But you talked about truly finding success when you start helping others and solving other people's problems. And all of our guests, regardless of the things that they've experienced. And look, we cover some heavy subjects. We've had people on that have experienced incest and sexual abuse and lost children and sometimes it gets heavy here on Salty Ginger Talk, and we're good with that. There needs to be a
Yeah.
place where you can talk about those things, because if you hold them in, it's like poison. It's going to get you
Yeah.
if you hold it
Absolutely.
in. But when their lives turn around is the point that you just so eloquently described, when they realize that the only way out is to help others, and that's going to lift them up and get them to where they want to go. And when they stop focusing on the internal and me and I, and they focus on the external and we and us, that's when their lives turn. That's when they start seeing success. That's when they find the path that leads them to where they are now, which is happy and productive and living a life of purpose. And you just described it so
Yeah.
well. Such
Well,
a good way to think.
and you've nailed that right on the head. And and I'm glad you brought up those people who unfortunately suffered great tragedies, great pain and suffering. And of course we always ask the why. But but the key is to take that suffering and use that as a part of my tool belt. Okay, after we recover. Okay, and we've got to recover. Okay, we do. But a part of that recovery process is learning then to use my pain to offset someone else's pain. Where did Mothers Against Drunk Drivers come from? How did that start?
Yeah, it was from a mom who lost her son to a drunk driver.
There it is.
Yep.
How about Chuck Colson in Prison Fellowship? How did that start? You have a guy who's second most powerful man in the world right next to the president, right? They called him the hatchet man.
Yeah.
Okay. This guy thrived on pride and ego and power and authority. And he's at the top of the top, right next to the president. And then a few weeks later, he's in prison, you know? And what did he do with that? He took that and he said, because it opened his eyes to see a side of life he'd never seen. And he said, I'm going to make a difference for these people. And he established what's called Prison Fellowship, which is one of the most phenomenal rehabilitation programs in existence on the planet. I don't know of anything more powerful than that. And so he began making a difference to helping people, to be able to change and to make the changes so that when they get out of prison, they stay out of prison. And it's very interesting, and this will tie into some things here. But I was actually, and I've had the opportunity to work with Chuck. I'd had a chance to go to a couple of different prisons with Chuck when he was alive back in the early 2000s, and and then go to other prisons, in Belize and Costa Rica and different places around the globe here. And when this one place in Belize, the prison was so bad, it was so corrupt in this prison that the government decided to sell it to a private institution because they were it was out of control. They were averaging 496 deaths per year,
Oh,
from inside.
yeah. No, I know what you're talking about. Wow.
I mean, it was just radical. And the recidivism rate in there was 84%. In other words, 84% of the people who got out of prison were back in prison within 2 years, 2 to 3 years. 84%. So when this private organization comes in, they asked this gal who had been trained through prison fellowship if she would work on their rehab program. And this lady, I think she was 67 when she started.
Mm.
And she used to go in and try to work with some of the guys and stuff like that. But she says, okay, she says, but if we're going to follow this program, she says, I've got to have a separate facility because there's a commitment to this, right? And they said, well, the only place in the whole yard that is separated is the big building there in the center of the yard. But the gangs run that. And she said, and the guy told her, he said, the guards won't go in there. The guards never go in there. It's too dangerous. And she says, well, if I can get them to give it to me, can I have it? And they said, they just started laughing at it, right? This little 67-year-old, she just walks right over to this place. And she walks right into the place and she tells them what she's going to do. And she says, all of you guys have got to move out. If you want to stay here, you're going to be a part of my program, right? 17 of them said they wanted to be a part of her program. And she got them to move out. And I mean, these guys were totally blown away. Within 3 years, Joe, within 3 years, the deaths dropped down to, I think it was 14. And no, excuse me, dropped down in the low 20s. But the recidivism rate went from 84% to 14%.
Wow.
And why did that happen? What was different? See, most people, they think if I'm going to change, I've got to change my activities. Now, I understand when you change your activities, things can change. But if your heart doesn't change, if your mind doesn't change, if
Yep.
your perspective doesn't change, it's only going to be temporary and it's going to be extremely difficult to do something that's contrary to your thinking or your heart. And what this little old lady did is she worked on changing their heart, changing their minds, changing their thinking. And when their hearts changed and when their thinking changed, they changed. And when they changed, their activities changed. A lot of people say what you do will determine who you are. I say no, who you are determines what you do. Let me ask you this. What does an electrician do? What does a musician do? What does an athlete do? See? Listen, the electrician doesn't play the violin.
Mm.
He's an electrician. Who he is determines what he does. If you're a musician, that determines what you do. And so we just need to help people to understand who they are. And when they understand who they are, that will determine what they do. You know, if you say, listen, if you can become a kind person, you're not going to do mean things. If you're a kind person, you're going to do kind things, you know? And so she learned to change them from the inside out. And that's where all change begins. It begins on the inside. Jim Rohn said, for things to change, you've got to change.
Yep.
You know, and when I wrote that was when I wrote it down. I got home that night and I looked at that thing and I said, wait a second, why is it for things to change that I got to change? You know, I was a little naive. I got it. Listen, I'm in a learning process here, right? Now that's the thing. And I thought, come to think of it, and I thought, wow, actually, I guess come to think of it, things don't change. People do. I mean, do we have poverty today? Do we have corruption today?
Yep.
Do we have exuberant wealth today? Do we have, hungry today? Yeah. Did we have them 100 years ago? 1,000 years ago? 2,000 years ago? Things don't change. But how we respond to those things, that's what changes.
Mm.
And so it begins from the inside. It's how I respond to problems. That's where the problem come in. The problem isn't the problem. It's how we respond to the problem that becomes the problem. And sometimes that becomes a bigger problem.
Right.
So,
So when you're working with people, like, totally agree with everything you said. I think you said it really well. But that mindset shift, because we talk about it a lot on the podcast, on our podcast as well, because I do a couple episodes a week where it's just me talking about a subject. And it's so funny you brought up prison, because I did an episode a couple months ago about the incarceration system in the United States.
mm,
And that I think, I like to do things fact-based and evidence-based. So I go where facts and evidence leads me.
mhm,
And I do that on regardless of the subject. Like, I did an episode on abortion statistics to kind of lay out, here is what abortion statistics look like in the United States, so that when you're having the conversation, you should at least know what you're talking about.
mhm.
But on the prison system, if the goal is to rehabilitate people, we're not doing a good job of it, because the recidivism rate in the United States is above 70%. Within 5 years, if you're in prison and you get out, within 5 years, you're going to be back there based on the statistics.
Right.
And I'm all for people having to be held accountable for their bad actions. I'm all for it. And
Absolutely.
I said that multiple times in the episode, and I still got comments. You're just soft. I'm like, yeah, you have no idea who you're talking to. I
That's
am not.
all.
I'm not soft, and I am not soft on crime or accountability. You've got me confused with somebody else. But but I am able to read statistics, and I am able to observe things and draw conclusions from my observations. And when you have people repeating the same habits over and over again, even after they're out of prison, and the prison sentence doesn't really end when you get out of prison, try getting a job with a conviction on your record. Try
Right.
renting an apartment with
Right.
a conviction on your record.
Problems are still there.
Yeah, you can't re-enter society because we judge you based on your previous actions. I don't know what the right answer is, but I do know that what we're doing isn't working. And I made some suggestions based on things I read and other people who are much better versed in that subject than I am. But why don't we do mentorship programs? Why don't we do apprenticeship programs? Why don't we have a path for someone to come out that can get a job, even with the black mark that they've got on their resume, and prove that they have rehabilitated themselves and prove that they want to go back into regular society? And we don't do that. But my question really is, going back to the mindset thing,
Mhm.
when you work with people, what are some tips or tricks you give people to change the mindset when those current, call them negative, call them unproductive, call them damaging thought processes
Mhm.
sneak in? I'm not good enough. I don't know what to do, so I'm going to do nothing. I don't deserve this, right? Those thoughts always creep in. How do you teach and coach people to change those thoughts when they creep into their heads?
Well, I mean, it's and what you're saying is absolutely right. In other words, your mindset is what you have your mind set on. So the question is what is your mindset on? And so what I share with people, our mind is like this amazing computer, far beyond that, but just to basically to kind of give people an idea here. And so the computer, operates based on, the programs that are downloaded. And the question is what are you downloading? And so everything that we do, it all begins in the mind. Okay. As a man thinketh, so is he.
Mm,
Right. And so, how are you thinking? What are you thinking? Do you really want to think about what you're thinking about? So, but here's the key to it. The key is this. Your thoughts control your mind. Absolutely. But you control your thoughts. You determine what you see, what you read, what you hear, and what you experience. See, you get to choose. See, that's the difference. The difference is I get to choose those things. So if I need to think different things, I need to download different thoughts. And if I can download the thoughts, if I can download the thinking, if I can download the perspective, see, then that's going to cause me to think different. And so, if I think bad things, I'm going to do bad things. If I think good things, I'll do good things. That's why I was saying earlier, I mean, if I'm a kind person, I'm going to do kind things. So it has to do with who you are. So develop that, understand who you are, and then you determine the things that you want to think about by choosing the things you see, read, hear, and experience. And when we do that, it's all the difference in the world, and God, I forget his name, but in the book Good to Great,
Jim
uh,
Collins.
Jim Collins, yes,
Yep.
thank you. So in his book, it was phenomenal, because he lays out this, these five stages, that people go through and the things that made good companies great.
I love that book, by the way. I
Yeah.
absolutely, I've read it like three times. It's
Yeah,
awesome.
I mean, and it's brilliant. And as you know, but for your audience sake, in order to be one of these good to great companies, you had to have, I think it was a 30 or 35% growth rate. Excuse me. But you had to maintain it for 3 consecutive years in order to move from the good to great. Otherwise, it could be just part of the curve, right?
Yep.
So you had to maintain that stability. And but I love the stages that he talked about there with respect to businesses also applies to life because a lot of people have that, that first stage, which is life, life sucks, you know, and people think that, and there's a lot of people, who have that mentality, because they're the condition they were born in, the culture they were born in, the lack of education they have, the lack of, parenting or a missing father, missing mother, or whatever the situation might be. And so they figure, life sucks because, there's nothing I can do about it. But when that person realizes, no, no, listen, life doesn't suck because you can choose. See, they don't think they have a choice. They think it's fate. But when they realize that they have a choice, when they realize that they can choose and that they can make different decisions and the different decisions will bring different results, then they say, oh, real. Oh, so then it's not that life sucks. And you illustrate, say, listen, so there was somebody just like you, but they made these decisions and look at them. So now they're making progress and now they've succeeded. And this person, they were in a situation even worse and they made right decisions and look at them. Now they're making progress. And so then they come to the realization, oh, so it's not that life sucks. It's just that my life sucks. So, but see, that's a great point. That's growth because what that does is what you were talking about earlier. It now causes them to say, okay, so I've got to be accountable for my decisions.
Mm,
And when they're accountable for the decisions, and when they realize that, they say, oh, so I just need to learn to make better decisions. And when I get make better decisions, then I get better results. And when I have consistent better decisions, then I have consistent results. And pretty soon I begin pulling myself out of that trap, out of that situation, and I begin growing and developing and doing more. And then pretty soon, it goes from, life sucks to my life sucks to life's great. Why is life great? Because I made good decisions and I got good results. And then it's, hey, look at me. Look at what I've done. Hey, I'm in it. I've got it. I'm tops. Look at me. And pride and arrogance. So that's good news, but it's also the bad news because then it's all about me. It's look what I've done.
mm.
And until we get to the point, because listen, you can only do so much on your own. I mean, we're talking about before the show. I mean, you and I both. I mean, where are you going to be without James?
Yeah.
We're
Yes.
going to be in trouble, right?
That's exactly right. That's right.
So what we begin to realize is, listen, I can do a lot by myself, but if I can collaborate with other people, and use their strengths and my strengths. And if we take their strengths and my strengths, and that's what Collins talks about in his book. He said, okay, let's collaborate with other companies. We'll take what you've got over here and what I've got over here, and listen, let me introduce you to this person over here. This person over here would be a tremendous asset to you. And so now we begin collaborating, we begin growing. See, and then all of a sudden, wow, life is really great, right? And so then you say, okay, so now we're collaborating and now we've got this competition going on, right? And the competition is great because it causes us to grow. But then there's that next level, that last level, and where you're at the top of things, where life is great. See? And that comes when you're more focused on the cause than you are on the company. See, and this is where we see companies that are contributing back to charities and different things. Joe, I was coming back from a big event in Florida with the top 1% of our company, and I was coming back to LA from Florida, and I'm sitting on the plane next to this guy Ed, who ran Blue Shield Hospital in Los Angeles.
Mm.
He had like 1,400 employees. And so we got a 3.5, 4 hour flight, whatever it was, and so we're having this great conversation. I'm learning what he's doing. He talks to me about the health industry, and we talk about what's going on and such there, and and so it was just really great. But then when we got to the getting ready to land, he pops this question into me, and I knew what he was asking, but his question was this. He said, "So Denny," he said, I mean, you've got a huge company. I mean, at that point in time, I think we were like a 6, $7 billion company. Now we're up to 8, 9 billion. But he says, you've got this huge company. He said, tell me something. Who's your biggest competition? Now, I know what he's asking. Is it Nutrisystem? Is it, Weight Watchers? Is it this? Who's your biggest competition, right? And when I gave him the answer, I caught him by surprise. I said, "Well, Ed," I said, "I tell you what," I said, "Our competition, is sickness, health, heart disease, malnutrition, poverty, lack of education, lack of self-confidence." I said, "That's our enemy. We're fighting disease and these things, sickness, right? Fatigue." And he just went, "Oh yeah." And he got it. See, because and that's where we want to involve ourselves in something that's bigger than we are, that requires us to collaborate with other people so that we can accomplish more, so that we can build. Listen, there's a reason, that knowledge is doubling, what, every 2.7 years now or something like that. You
Really
know,
quickly. Yep.
yeah, but why is that? It's because of this collaboration, because everybody, is combining their energy. And of course, with the internet today, we've got, who knows how fast it's going to duplicate now, but it's that idea, so it's understanding that I want to involve myself in something that's bigger than me, and then take what I have and make my biggest contribution that I can to this cause, or company, and I think that's a big thing for people who are running companies. They need to make sure that not just their staff, but all their employees, that they feel a part of the vision. That was one thing that the founder of our company, Mark, was so brilliant, because he would go in and he would talk to the people in the warehouse, and he would know a lot of them by name, and he would encourage them. I mean, the loyalty that was generated because he helped them realize, he says, listen, without you doing what you're doing, we wouldn't get our people the products that they need and time that they need them to make the changes in their life, and he made every single person feel a value because they were a part of that big picture. And without them, that big picture wouldn't happen if they didn't do their job efficiently and effectively. So, there's that kind of thing of always doing what we can to encourage people and to give them hope and help them to understand their value and the part that they play in the bigger cause.
Yeah, I love that. I have just kind of a personal anecdote related to what you just said. So I have three sons, and when my sons were growing up, I coached a lot of their baseball because I went through college on a baseball scholarship, and I'm passionate about it. And I loved, it was a great way to teach young men how to be good men growing up. You can teach a lot of life lessons through athletics. And I would usually wind up coaching or helping coach the all-star team. So you play the regular season and everybody plays, and then they pick 12 kids and they go play other leagues' best kids, and it's fun.
Yeah,
But you've got some egos there because you've got the best kid from every team.
right.
And so, I've been around baseball a long time, and I've been around sports a long time, and I knew how to deal with that stuff, especially with boys. And so the very first thing I would do at the very first practice is I would gather everybody up by the dugout, and I would say, go stand, run out. I want you to run out and go. Because that was one of the things I said. We run on fields, we don't walk. If you're on the field, you run. You walk on the other side of the fence. We run when we're out here because we're athletes. We work hard. And so, to your point, values, right? Trying to instill values. You play the game the right way. You work. You contribute. You do what you need to do. You run to the position you would play if you got to pick it. And I would always wind up with 8 shortstops, 3 pitchers, and 3 catchers. So they'd all be standing there, and I would walk to home plate. And I'm a pretty big guy, and I was a pitcher when I played in college, but I was actually a really good hitter as well. So I would hammer a ball into right field. And I would do it on purpose because they would all turn and watch it going out into right field. And while they were watching it, I would yell. I mean, I was loud, and I would yell, how important is right field right now? And it would scare them. Like they would look at me like I'd be like, how important is right field right now? Don't you wish we had a right fielder right now? And they'd all look at me, and I would say, playing right field is not a punishment. One of you is going to wind up in right field. And if you don't do the best job possible out there, you're not contributing to the team. You're not doing your job. It is not a punishment to play out there. It is a valuable position, like I just demonstrated. And you need to check your ego and do the best job you can at whatever it is you can do to help this team. And that always kind of set the tone that we're playing together as 12
Yeah.
people as a unit, not 12 individuals out for their own personal glory. And look, those teams were pretty successful. They competed really well and they improved over the season. And I was fortunate that I played that sport at a pretty high level. And so a lot of parents got it wrong. They were worried about their kid and blah, blah, blah. And I always told them, look, my job is to develop these kids right now. It's not about making your kid into a major league ready player. That's not at all what my job is. My job is to develop all of them. And that's what I'm going to do. And if you don't like it, I don't care because I know I'm right.
Yeah. Parents are the biggest problem.
Yeah, I always say now the only team I'd coach is a team of orphans. You find me a team of orphans, I'll coach that team all day long because then I never have to deal with a parent. But uh, I always, your job, even at the high school level, is person and player development. It's not about winning the games that are on your schedule. Like that's a natural byproduct that happens if you develop kids the right way. And I think we've lost a lot of that
Yeah.
in our society today. And we, pivoting back to the Jim Collins, it's such a great book. I'm so glad that you brought it up. Um, One of the things he talks about in there is the companies that were really successful, they didn't do flashy and sexy stuff. They did what they were good at over and over and over again, really, really well. And
Yeah.
that's when, like, you've been talking about that for the hour plus that we've been talking here, Dennis, is do what you're good at over and over and over again and fall in love with it. Fall in love with doing it well, and you're going to have a great life, you
Yeah.
know?
Absolute. And it makes life so much more enjoyable and effective. When you're doing what you love, you're far more effective at it, and people can see it.
Yeah. Well, and it might not be obvious because I know you've described yourself a couple of times in our conversations as an introvert, and yet you're a pretty accomplished public speaker. So how did you square that circle where you're an introvert that likes silence, that likes alone time, that likes all of those things, yet you get on a stage and you transform into someone who loves being on a stage and coaching and helping people? How'd you connect those dots?
Well, I mean, a lot of it, 'cause I learned to listen. But in my quiet times, I'm running through. I'm a thinker. In the personality deals, I'm what they call an INTP
Hmm.
on the
Yep.
Myers-Briggs, deal. But so I'm a thinker, a perceiver, and that kind of thing. So I am quiet. But when that opportunity then opens, then that's my chance. And my thinking is the way I try to formulate things, I want things to be able to make sense and I want things to flow. And so my thinking is, something? They may have heard this before, but they may never have heard it the way I'm going to share it before. And so my thinking is if they don't hear this from me today, they may never hear it. This may be my only shot. When I first met my wife, she was a customer first and then joined the company. And so she saw more of the introverted side. And so we'd been together for maybe 6, 8 months, 10 months, maybe at most, something like that. And I said, listen, why don't you come down to Orange County and come to this training? I think it's time, you can see some other people, see what's going on in the company, get a little bit bigger picture. She says, okay. And I said, I'll be speaking down there. She said, oh, okay. And so she comes down. Now, all she's ever seen me is one-on-one or one-on-three or four, just small group type things. And so we get down there and we've, got, 12, 1,500 people in the room. And so I get up, to do my message. And when I get up there, and for me, it's just like somebody just flips a switch. When I get on the stage, it's like the light bulb goes on and I'm off and running. I go, you know, because I know what I want to say. I'm passionate about it. I believe in it. I have conviction about it. And so I get up there and I start talking and she's sitting there and she turns to the person next to her. She says, who is that guy? It was so funny, right? But I think that's really it, and I think that this may be the only chance that these people get to hear what I'm going to hear. And so, the thinking is I want to communicate something to them that's going to make a difference for them that day. And that's always my goal. I always want somebody to be able to walk out from one of my presentations saying, I'm going to take that one thing with me, even if it's only one thing, you know, but to take something with them that will change their life. And that's the idea. Now, when I'm finished speaking, I go back to the green room. I'm not the one who wants to go back out front and do all the stuff, just I'm going to go back to the green room and hide till the thing's over and then I can go home, And I mean, and it's kind of funny because they when you're a speaker, and they have different parties and things like that. So you got to go to the parties and make your show, because people, it's part of the deal. And so when we have these things, I'll go to the party and I kind of go in, I say hello, take a few pictures, make the rounds, and then I go home. I go back to my room, because I just, that's where I want to be.
Yeah, right.
I'm there
Right.
just long enough for them to know that I was there. That's it.
And are there what topics, what's the most common topic you speak about when you speak publicly?
Well, it's maximizing your potential, and that's the key. I've uh, and because that's really what I did, as I really analyzed it after Bob told me to write down all these principles, I began to realize, really, my job is to take somebody from wherever they are. You mentioned it at the beginning of the show, right? Where you say, listen, it doesn't make any difference where you are, just start. I mean, if
Yep.
you're broke, start broke. If you're stupid, start stupid, but start, you know. My thinking is it's never where you're at, it's what direction you're going in. And so all we need to do is get you pointed in the right direction. So if we can get you pointed in the right direction, and then you can learn to live by principles, then you can learn to maximize your potential. And so ultimately, and each one of these things can be a message in itself, and a conference in itself, because if we're going to maximize our potential, the first thing we need to know is we need to know what's my purpose. Okay. In other words, I need to know the purpose in what I'm doing. I need to know the purpose in who I am. We've talked about that throughout the show here. And then I need to know the purpose in my essence. In other words, the meaning of life. So I need to understand my purpose in those three areas: what I do, who I am, and what's the meaning of my life. And once I have that, then the second step, if I'm going to maximize my potential, is personal development. In other words, I start wherever I am, start where you are, right? And then develop myself into the person necessary to fulfill my purpose. If this is my purpose, I need to become the person necessary to fulfill that purpose. So who do I need to become? It's not who do I need to do, what do I need to do, but it's who do I need to become. See, who I am determines what I do. What I do determines what I have. If I do good things, I get good. I have good things. If I do bad things, I have bad results, right? So, you know, what I do determines what I have. And then what I have determines who I help, who I get to influence, who I get to impact. And so it's be, do, have, and then help. So that's that process. So I need to become that person. See, a lot of people think that personal development's reading the books and going to the seminars. Joe, and I'm sure with all the guests you've had on here, you've seen so many people. I mean, they get hooked into, one of these, seminar chain deals, right? They go to the first one and they say, all your problems are going to be solved. Show up here and it's going to be great. And then at the end of the show, they say, listen, this has been great, but listen, we've got part 2 and 3 and 4 and
Right.
6 and 8 and 10, And so, each sales deal is just to get you to come back to the next one, right? And so, so they go to the seminars and they read the books, but they haven't grown. They haven't developed. See, for me, personal development, it's not reading the books or attending all the seminars. It's applying the principles that's going to make my life and other lives better. See, it's overcoming the obstacles that are preventing me from becoming the person that I need to become. So if I haven't become something different, if I haven't changed, then I haven't developed. I might, know all the stuff of the books and all the material of the seminars. I call those people, they're educated idiots. They know it all, but they haven't done nothing yet. I mean, Ray Stedman said, it's not what you know, it's what you do with what you know,
That's exactly right. Yep. I call it analysis paralysis,
Yeah,
right?
right,
I need to put a plan together. I need to study. I need to
right.
research. I need to blah 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 blah. I'm not
And
discounting any of those things. I'm all for being educated and as prepared as possible.
right.
But at some point, you've got to take the step. You've got to do the thing.
Yeah.
And I
And
would
that's where
argue,
mindset is. I
yeah,
mean,
right.
so once I'm going to develop something, I say, okay, I'm going to develop it. I'm going to overcome the obstacles. I will do it, right? So Then I need the mindset. I need to get my mind set on the things that are going to help me. So that's where I determine what I see, what I read, what I hear, what I experience. So that's my mindset. So my mindset will help me to become that person to fulfill my purpose. And when in that process, guess what everybody deals with every day? People.
Hmm.
So if we don't develop the people skills in my journey, because my journey is always going to involve somebody else. No man's an island, right? And so I've got to learn the people skills. And when I can learn the people skills and learn to be interested instead of interesting, see, that's a key. Learning to seek to understand more than be understood. Most everybody wants to be understood more than
Yeah.
they understand. So I teach my guys, listen, learn to understand so that you can be understood, right? And then once you've got that, as you develop those people skills, you're automatically then going to become a leader. And that's where you have that opportunity to be able to leave a legacy. And when you have that legacy, that's the idea. How long do you want that legacy to last? Is it just going to be temporary or is it going to be something that you're going to pass on? And that's where mentoring comes in and taking what you know and not what you do, but what others do as a result of what you do. Because if I can get others, to do more because of my influence and my impact, then my legacy continues on. If I have all the accomplishments and accumulated all the things, and when I die, it's gone. See, then the legacy is done. But if I can transmit that to other people so that they can carry on the legacy, then my legacy goes on forever. And then the last part, of course, then is learning to keep it all in balance because it's easy to get distracted and get focused. I mean, there's people, and I'm sure you've seen these people who focus so much on their career that they rise to the top in their career, the top in their company, the top in their industry, right? But in the meanwhile, they've destroyed their family
Hmm.
because they spend all their time doing this. What good does it do to reach the goal and miss the objective? People say, my objective is to be able to, create a great career so that we can have, nice homes and vacations and we can do things with our family and we can have fun and do all this stuff. And they rise to their career, but they've destroyed their family in the process because their kids don't want to talk to them anymore. Their wife left them. I mean, so what good does it do to reach the goal and miss the objective? So we got to keep it all in balance, you know. And if we do that, then we'll be able to maximize our potential. So, like say, any one of those six things is a subject in itself. But if you put it all together, then you'll maximize your potential.
Yeah. And so you do put it all together because I don't know what the right way to refer to it is. You do seminars, courses, trainings. Not sure how to refer to it. I know they're excellent. With that said, what do you, I guess, two questions on that. Who is your typical participant in those? Is it someone that's in a great spot trying to get to a better spot? Is it someone that's not happy with where they're at, trying to get to a place where they're happy? And what's the most rewarding thing for you as the facilitator of those to see coming out of them?
Well, great question. And you know, really, as I go through that, you know, um, the idea here is just to get them find the person who basically is dissatisfied. That person who's at the point in their life, where they say, something, I'm not going to live like this anymore.
Mm,
And listen, and that could be somebody in their 20s. It could be somebody in their 40s or 50s where they just said, listen, I've had it. I'm not going to live like this anymore. I mean, um, Sam Walton was what, 57 years old. And he said, I'm not going to live like this anymore. I'm going to start something and put it at 57. Colonel Sanders started KFC at what, 67? So it doesn't make any difference what age you are. What makes the difference is, do you want to make some changes to make your life better? So my ideal person is the person who's ready for change and willing to listen. And if I always say that the only two things I ever look for as I develop team members throughout the world, I look for two things. One, desire, and two, work habits. If you
Hmm.
have desire and you don't have the work habits, you're fooling yourself. You're living in a fantasy world. If you got the work habits, but you don't have the desire, you're going to work yourself to death. So, so the desire and work habits. So someone who has a desire and work and the work habits, the willing, who's teachable, that's going to be my ideal because the principles will work. See, I've got to have somebody with the desire to make the changes who will follow the principles that are guaranteed because principles work 100% of the time. See, I said, listen, this product works 100% of the time. The plan works 100% of the time. I don't know. I know what the
that's
product does. I know what the plan does, but I don't know what you're going to do yet.
that's the wild card. You're the wild card.
That's right. Well, they are. And it's the truth. They are the wild card. That's why success is a choice. We just simply have to decide. And when we decide, listen, there's no lacking of information in our world today. I'll tell you something, Joe. There's no lacking of people who will be willing to help you. Now, you may have to search for them,
Sure.
but there's plenty of people who will commit time to you if you're serious. you know, and that's where I was fortunate. See, when I talked with Mark and when I talked with Larry and Jim and Rick Warren and Bob Beal, when I met with these guys, they knew I was serious,
Yeah.
right? And so they took me under their wing, and they knew that I would do what they said, and I did. And this is what it's resulted in. So now I'm just thinking, okay, now's the time to take this and provide a way for people. And the beauty about the book, it's funny because my family, they saw me go from rags to riches, right? They saw me go from buzzing around town to flying around the world. And uh, so they saw what I did, but they didn't know how I did it,
Hmm.
because they weren't there. And so, when I finished this book, I was able to send them the book. So now all of a sudden they say, oh, that's how he did it. See? So, they saw the what, but they didn't see the how. See? And they didn't understand the why. So once they get that, so that lengthens the legacy. And so, so that, and now, putting together an online training program. It's very simple. It's just like a little, a 6-part online deal. It's got, a number of just different little videos mixed in between, and it's got assignments. It's a interactive type of a training. So just to widen the thing, because there may be people out there like me who don't like crowds, you
Yep.
know, and online training is good. And so they're just, they're a series of short little videos, anywhere from 3.5 minutes to, I think the longest one is 16 minutes, and then there's assignments that, okay, stop the video, go do this, so that they can practically, literally go down and do some things that will actually make a difference for themselves. And so, so between that and the live seminars and then the keynotes, to stimulate some of those seminars. I mean, that's what I'm looking to do right now, and it's just fun, just to get out there and meet a whole new group of people, and very, very exciting.
Well, I love that. There's a great lesson to be learned there too, because you're in your 70s. You've accomplished a ton of great things in your life. It'd be real easy to kind of put everything in the parking lot and just kind of ride off into the sunset and sit on the front porch in a rocking chair, right? But you have no interest in doing that.
You
So,
know, they say,
yeah,
when you retire, you got to retire to do something you love. You don't retire from something. You've got to retire to something. And people say, well, Denny, I mean, you've been doing this for 45 years. When are you going to retire? And I said, well, you retire to do what you love. And I've been doing it for 45 years. I'd have to retire to do what I'm doing. You know? So I mean, it's just there. I mean, listen, you just give until you run out of gas.
yeah, right. Yeah, I've never understood retirement. It's never, nothing about retirement appeals to me. What would I go do with my time if I was retired? I want to be productive. I want to make a difference. I want to live with purpose. And um, I think for me, taking action is what gives me the most, that makes me feel the most purposeful. Like I'm actually making a difference because I'm doing something right now about it,
Right.
you know? And that's what I try to instill in other people is you've got to develop that mindset. And it doesn't matter what it is. That's the beauty of our world is you get to pick it. There's like I if you're going to be an electrician, be the best electrician on the planet. If you're
Yeah,
going to be a ballerina, be the best ballerina on the planet. If you're going to be a school teacher, be the best school teacher on the planet. And embrace it. Don't focus on the
yeah,
look, anything they call it work for a reason. They got to pay you to do it. However, you should find something. I think about it in percentages. If you can't be happy X% of the time, you're probably in the wrong profession.
right.
And if you are so looking forward to the weekend because you can't wait for this week to end, you're probably in the wrong profession. If you dread Monday mornings, you're probably in the wrong profession. And you got to start looking around. And you've talked about it over and over and over again in our conversation here that you've got to find out what your purpose is and what the values are that are important to you and make those a part of your everyday life, including your professional life. And
Yeah.
that's when things will get really good for you. And that's always going to come back to focusing on solving other people's problems or helping other people. That's when it gets to the best point possible. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's so funny because talking to my team, I said, team, we're in a unique position here. We're probably one of the few companies on the planet that thank God it's Monday instead of Friday.
right?
So
Yeah. Yep. Well, so Dennis, one of the things we do, is there anything we haven't talked about yet? Are there any questions I haven't asked you or any subjects that you feel really passionate about that we haven't talked about yet that you want to make sure we cover before we end our conversation?
well, I tell you, I think, yeah, I'd like to just make sure that we keep things in balance. And I made a reference to that, but but it's real important for us to have a balance in our lives. And in order to have that, we can succeed in one area, but if we succeed in one area to the neglect in the other,
Mm,
excuse me, uh, it can be detrimental and will lack, our maximizing our potential. And so, there's three parts to our bodies, our beings. Okay, we have our body, our soul, and our spirit. And so we need to make sure that we keep these three areas in balance, and not only in balance, but prioritized. Because so many people in our world today, it's if it feels good, do it. I do things according to how I feel,
mm,
my emotions and this kind of thing. And that can be very destructive and end up causing a tremendous amount of chaos. So when you've got your body, your soul, and your spirit, most people, do what feels good. And so, it's what's going to be good for the body, and then, get my mind around to make that happen. And then the spiritual side of our lives kind of lots of times gets left out. But the reality is we were designed to have our lives governed by our spirit. Okay, that's where our conscience comes in. That's where we understand right and wrong. Listen, some people want to argue with that. It can be a controversial subject, but the bottom line is we all know that there's a right and wrong, and
mhm.
and the big debate comes in where did it come from, right?
Right.
But we forget that for right now. The point
Yeah.
being is that there's a right and wrong, and we know that there's a right and wrong. Our spirit, that spiritual side of our lives, determines, those things, our conscience, what's right and what's wrong. So that's got to govern our soul, and our soul is our mind, our will, and our emotions. And we get that confused. We get that backwards too. We want to know why everything's so backwards today because we do everything backwards.
Mm,
The idea is, it's how I feel, will determine, what I want to do, and then hopefully I can justify it with my mind, right? But the way it's supposed to be is I decide with my mind, and you've talked about it how many times here, you act with your will. It's not, I'm going to try. No, I will. I'm going
yep.
to step out. I'm going to take action. I decide with my mind. I act with my will. And then I enjoy the emotions, which are the results. See, the emotions are the results of the decisions I've made carried out by the act of my will. And when I do that, then life is much better. And then we have the body. The body's where we live. It's just simply the place where, listen, I'm not my body. Okay. I know that because my body doesn't pay attention to me sometimes. Okay. So I'm not my body, but my body just happens to be the place that I live. And I love that being in the nutrition industry. We said, listen, you've only got one body. You don't get a replacement deal going on here. So, it's best that you take care of it. People say, well, you're taking all these things and stuff. And I said, listen, I believe that it's appointed unto man once to die. After that, the judgment comes. But it's appointed unto man once to die. So if you're designed, appointed to live until you're 90 and you destroy your body by the time you're 60, you got 30 years of hell coming up.
Yeah, right.
So I suggest you just take the best care of your body. It's the only one you got, so take good care of it, right? So we want to do that with our body. So you've got your spirit, your soul, and your body. Now, if you maximize your body, you're the perfect specimen of health. You're Mr. Universe, Mrs. World. You're the specimen of health and fitness and looks, right? You max it out 100%. And your soul, your mind, your will, and your emotions. Your mind, you're brilliant, you're genius, you've studied, you've got an IQ that's off the chart. Your will is powerful and strong, you're disciplined and you're determined and you make things happen and you enjoy the most of the love and the experience from it is just wonderful. You've maxed out your soul. You're 100%. Einstein, sit down here, you're way below me. I've maxed it out. So if you've got 100% on your body and 100% on your soul. But if you've eliminated the spiritual side, if you've distinguished that conscience that I'm going to do whatever I want to do, not what I should do, right? If I've eliminated that, then that means, potential 100% on three. If I'm only got 100%, 100%, 100%, and zero, that means I'm only at 66%. So that means even if I max out the body and the soul, I'm only operating at 66% potential. I got to fulfill this. I've got to get the balance. Now, the question is, are we 100% on our body and are we 100% on our soul? No, nobody is. And listen, if I'm 50%, I'd be real excited, right? So if I'm at 50%, that means 50%, 50%, zero. That means I'm only operating at 33% of my potential. So I need all three, all in balance, prioritized so that I can maximize my life because they're all valuable parts. And listen, I don't think anybody would disagree that we got body, soul, and spirit. The question is, what are you doing with them?
Yep.
And so if we can keep that in balance, then life just not only does it become meaningful and purposeful, but we'll be able to have the greatest impact and leave the greatest legacy.
Wow, great stuff. Absolutely love it. Yeah, look, I agree with everything you just said. I always think about, there's some people whose jobs are to provide care for people at the end of their lives, right? So people that provide palliative care, hospice,
Yeah.
those types of jobs. And there's been all sorts of studies done with those folks who have shared, while still respecting people's privacy and not naming names, but what are the common themes you see when people are at the end of their life? And there's a couple of them that are resonated with me a long time ago, and they happen to fit really well with generally how I live my life. And look, I always tell people I don't throw stones because I live in a glass house. It's one of the reasons I'm not judgmental. Yeah, right. I love the TV show Ted Lasso. I don't know if you've ever watched Ted Lasso.
No.
It's on Apple Television. It's great. It's a great television show. And it's only 3 seasons long, but it's about a guy that coaches American football and gets hired to coach an English soccer team. But it's really a show about life, is what it's really about.
Hmm.
And he is kind of annoyingly and consistently positive with all of his people. And he works on trying to make people better. And as a byproduct of making the people better, they become better footballers, like they call them in England. They become better husbands. They become better fathers, all those things.
Right.
And there's one character in there that, without giving away plot lines, he is duplicitous and he kind of becomes a villain for a while. And he's trying to work his way back into the fold. And the people that he has kind of wronged, there's several of them that don't want to give him grace and give him a second chance. And Ted Lasso says something that's all that, like, ever since I heard it, I wrote it down. So he said, I hope either all of us or none of us are judged by our worst moments, but rather by the grace we show if we're given a second chance.
Mm.
And it's so well said, because if you want to judge other people, think about all the horrible things that you know you've done. We've all got things in our past that we're not proud of. I am certainly front of the line, not back of the line on this particular subject.
Yeah.
And so I don't judge other people on those things. But as it relates to the palliative care conversation, the couple of themes are: people don't regret actions they took. They regret things they didn't do but felt like they should have. I should have told that girl how I felt about her. I should have taken my shot at that job. I should have taken
Yeah.
that job and moved across the country instead of being scared of not doing it. And the other thing is, you touched on it. You said it. No one says, let me see me put my possessions one more time. They want they want that last minute with the people they care about. It's about relationships
Yeah.
and experiences. And I think what you just said just made that pop back into my head, because of how well you kind of talked about balancing life and soul, or body and soul and spirit.
Yeah.
And such a great message for our listeners. So yeah, just
Uh,
thanks a
Yeah,
lot for sharing that.
and
Really.
I've heard that too as well. That's a key. I've had friends in that palliative care industry, and that's what it is. You're exactly right. I mean, I think it's common known that, and so the idea of, if that's the end, then maybe we ought to work hard and develop our lives so that we can have that better end. Go ahead and take the chance. Go ahead and take the risk. Go ahead and do the deal. And yeah. So I mean, absolutely, Joe. That's so true, and that's part of the deal, and that's part of the thing I think that keeps people going to the end, is being able to give them that hope that they've made a difference.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
if towards the end of their life, in those last days or weeks, if they can be around the people to come in and say, I just wanted to let you know the difference you made for me. I just wanted I mean, what a way to go out. Go out with everybody telling you the difference that you made in their lives, how you touched them. And again, it's not the accomplishments that we've accumulated, but it's the people we've touched.
Yeah, you don't want to be pulling up your E-Trade account in your last minutes. That's not what you want to be. That's not what you want to be doing. Oh my gosh. Well, Dennis, absolutely loved having you on. Thank you so much. Let's do this again somewhere down the road. Like, it's been such a fun conversation, and I love how you speak about things, and it's absolutely taught me a bunch of things, and refresh some things that I might have already known but tucked way back in the memory bank. So let's stay in touch and bring you back on at some point down the road.
Absolutely. Thanks. And I just love the opportunity even to sharing some of these things, because what a lot of people don't realize, even when my book is an international bestseller, right? I tell you, I have to go back and read my own book to remind myself,
Yep.
So, I mean, it's that constant learning, and hopefully we're always learning, and just thanks for the privilege and the honor to share with your audience, and just sharing with you and getting to know you a little bit, and definitely we'll be in touch, buddy.
Yeah, that's great. And just real quick, guys, you're not going to have to go look for Dennis. We've got a link to his book. We got a link to his courses. If you want to book him as a speaker, you can get in touch with Dennis. Just look down in the show notes, and you'll be able to get right to him. So highly recommend, if you're in that market. It'd be hard to find someone. Uh, Dennis is top of the list. So just make sure you check down there if you want to get back in touch with them. So thank you again so much, Dennis. Really appreciate it. And we'll be in touch.
Thanks so much, buddy. See you again.
All right. Have a great week. All right, guys. Like we said at the top, Dennis, such a great guy and such a great message for people. Love how he shared his personal anecdotes and how he started coming out of college and got kind of a temporary gig, but looked around and said, hey, like, this isn't going to be good enough. I got to do better than I'm doing right now. Talked a lot about helping others. If you want to build a great life for yourself, the best way to do it is to help others. Talked about mindset, talked about balance, body, soul, spirit, like we talked about there at the end of the podcast. And just a great guy, just a great all around guy, great message. Hope you guys got as much out of it as we did, because that was just really an honor for us to speak with Dennis for as long as we did today. So, yeah, look, James puts it up over here every day. Don't forget to head over to our website, saltygingertalk.com. All of our podcast episodes are available there. We've got links to all our social media accounts there. We publish a newsletter every weekday that you can subscribe to on our website. And please comment, like, share, subscribe to our podcast on whatever platform you consume it on. Super helpful for us. We're going to keep finding awesome people like Dennis to come share their wisdom with you guys. You don't want to miss it when they come on. So make sure you don't miss the next episode of Salty Ginger Talk. We will see you there.